And it's really interesting now, because I think I'm starting to see a bit more like nuance in how people do sex work. And that's been like really tight. Like, I'm like, oh my God, yay. Like, cause for a very long time, like I felt like I was the only like deep hoe out there pondering these other things. And I'm just like, am I just crazy? But it's really interesting because I've seen maybe within like the last maybe like 5 years or so, I think there are starting to be a lot more, I guess, more convergence with like sex work and spiritual healing in the vein of decolonization. Because before colonization and before these white men told people what they were supposed to do and what they weren't supposed to do, there were like, you know, like sex priestesses. There was communities that honored that energy. And when you performed and did services for that energy, you were honored for it. You were held, you were highly regarded.
Right.
I at least know, at least for me and in like some like indigenous like West African cultures, definitely it was. But like I said, like those splits from those cultures and being colonized and brought here kind of like took a lot of those things away.
Right.
Which I know also in a lot of other indigenous cultures, like, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, here in America. And that was like part of like the destructive things that they did was like that was intentional to remove people, and specifically like female and trans people from two-spirit people from their sexuality.
Yes. And like, you know, it's so fucked up because even just like with the research that I do with, you know, the gender binary, and a lot of like indigenous cultures didn't even have those. You know what I mean? They didn't even have those. And usually, just like in any other like community or society, I've been reading some books about like more traditional like West African like communities and how they used to form and function. But like even in those communities, if a person was queer, like usually like queer people were known as like gay and queer people in traditional West African cultures, specifically like Yoruba and Igbo, like some like gay and queer people were known as like, you know, we were in both worlds. We had easy access to living world and dead world. And like we were the ones that would help and assist in those things. And that was part of our function. But like no one really cared about who you married or who you went to sleep with or anything like that. They even had different terms. Like they had like, you know, they had like male wives or like women husbands that like related to either like dominant women that went and like hunted and, you know, things like that, or men that raised children. You know what I mean? It was normalized. And only until white colonization and, you know, other countries started occupying those places did those systems get disrupted.
Right. And like I always feel like kind of like Captain Obvious saying shit like this, but I think that for the purpose of the podcast it's worth repeating this kind of stuff. Like the ideas that got imposed on all of us, because we are all living under them at this point.
Continuing to live under them.
And continuing. The ideas that we have now about gender, like Nikki just said, like they are arbitrary. They are not real. They are just what the colonizers, you know, who, you know, the quote unquote winners of the game or whatever, it's the value system that they brought with them and told everyone was true and real and normal and the only thing that is okay. But like they're made up. They're not
It was made
real at all.
up so that basically like cis white men could hoard all the power, you know, because if you create a difference, and if you create a difference of saying, well, a woman can't be strong, a woman can't be a soldier, or a woman can't fight, a woman can't be logical, a woman can't be you know, and like create all of these qualities that like aren't, you know, create all these qualities that one are seen as weak, which is not true. Emotional intelligence actually is like amazing.
Yeah.
Intuition is amazing. Empathy is amazing, but it created this system or this idea, and like no one, you know, it's not like, yeah, and if you just keep telling someone something over and over again, also, and if you keep creating a situation where if you bump up against that too much, systematically your life gets very hard.
They put a system of hierarchy in place so that there would be people who would be higher up who would want to defend this system and hold it into place. And that includes men, that includes police, that includes government officials. When you have a system of hierarchy, you have people who are living in a more comfortable position who hold this system in place, which in turn makes it harder for people who are not in those higher positions in the hierarchy. And they see how they make these laws, they enforce these laws, and they see how crappy like they've made like these other people's lives, and don't even attribute it to like their own decisions, and use it as a justification for upholding the power system. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, and it's all coming from, like we said, like the mothership. And the really sad part, I think, is that when you talk about a lot of this with a lot of people these days, like one of the ways that colonization has really gotten us and taken such a deep hold, I think, over the world is that the forces of oppression, for lack of a better term in this instance, like have systematically removed our ability to imagine anything else.
Yes.
Like by erasing priestesses, by erasing other genders and other ways of self-expression, and like on purpose turning every sex goddess into a fertility goddess, you know? Like they have taken away our ability to think that there's another option. And so we even if we are unhappy, for a lot of people, we look around and we just think, well, this is the only way to be, so I guess I just gotta keep being unhappy. And here we are.
Yeah,
right.
People are unhappy. They've done studies of people in marriages where they've determined that like the majority of women are happier in their later years when either they become divorced or their partner has passed away. And they start this training in early education. My kids came home with abstinence paperwork from school, and I'm like, no, we're going to talk about sex now. And first off, how great sex is, and second off, how to do it safely, because we don't believe in that.
Good for you. God.
Good for me. But like, think of all of those other kids who went home with this abstinence papers, and either their parents just did it and sent it back because it's just easier to do that. It's more comfortable to not.
Oh, yeah.
Or agreed with it and said, yeah, you need to do this abstinence stuff for health.
Yeah.
Right. And like, I don't know, like, it still is a trip to me to see how uncomfortable people are about sex. I see it with my fans, and I see it with, I've seen it, and it's so funny. It is, and it's so funny, and it's almost like I can almost see the war in their head, and I almost have to be like, just relax.
Let me entertain you.
the idea of even just, I don't know, practicing intention, like intention for intention for like most of like my clients, and like they're like, what? Huh? Like, and I'm just like, and that's scary to think. And I don't know, it's just scary to think that there really are people existing out here that aren't rooted in anything. And I'm just like, how did you survive so long? But I think like, you know what I mean? Like, how did you get here? But like, but I think like, you know, I think that goes to show too, like, you know, like I said, like with colonization, you know, it is a system, and it is a system, and it is a game for cis white men to win. It is. It was made for them and by them. And they did it well. Like I said before, when it comes to energy, when you stop giving it fuel, then what happens?
Yeah, that's a thought experiment I hope that some of our listeners take up, and that we can all take up that practice of focusing on, you know, where we're putting our energy. The more of us that do it, the more we'll see what happens.
The more people who see this, the more they'll realize that it's bullshit, and the more that they will stand up like against it and like be like, hey, that rule was made up for that person. Yeah. Like, do I have to, you know, do I have to keep doing that?
Right.
Yeah. And Nikki, what you just said about like realizing that there are so many people out there who aren't rooted in anything, like that just got me. Like that is, I feel like that's almost kind of the ultimate goal of the whole system, is to just create people as these individual bubbles that only have to make very simple choices in their lives, you know, like Coke or Pepsi, you know, Mac, oh my God, I'm so old, Apple, or, you know, Android. Like, just present people with fewer choices, and the choices that you do present them with, make them binaries, so it's real easy to pick one or the other, and just let them float around out there until they bump into each other, and then they either form an attachment or they decide they hate each other. And I'm getting a really vivid visual here.
Not only that, but I don't think that people are taught at all, but definitely not early enough to learn to ask questions. I mean, children are told to like just do what I say because I said it. Mm-hmm. And people don't learn how to ask why, like not just to ask why, but how to ask why this is in place. Why is it like this? Why am I ashamed? Why am I uncomfortable? And how can I make it, you know, how can I make it better? How can I learn more about it?
Yeah. Well, it kind of, you're totally correct. I think that goes back into like how the system conditions people to blindly follow it. And from the time we are very young, we are conditioned to not question. I know that happened to me. I would get in trouble all the freaking time for questioning stuff, especially in church. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. A woman has to submit to who? What? And you know what I mean? There are all of these, you know, and you know, the more you get in trouble for it, or you know, it's kind of, it's like it's all these different systems replicating itself. And it's funny because people don't even realize that they do it. People don't even realize that they do those things where it's like, you know, what do you mean I'm a racist? Well, I'm just gonna take away everything from you and like whatever, which is like a whole other like thing where we're not trained to question, we're not trained to pause on something, we're just trained to react and do.
Yeah, that's really true. Oh, I have such conflicted feelings about that, because on the one hand, Yeah, the internet is a terrible place full of trolls and darkness and meanness. But on the other hand, it has allowed for so many ideas and the sharing of so much knowledge across vast instances and,